Busting Anti-American Myths About the War of 1812. Hello, my name is Wesley Cragen. I am an American, a patriot, and a lover of history. This video is about one episode of American history known as the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was an armed conflict between the United States and the United Kingdom that began in 1812 and ended in 1815. It was the second and last war in which Americans fought against the British. The reasons for the war as well as the outcome are hotly debated today, with many people believing many different things. The purpose of this video is to explain what really caused the war and what its results were without bias. I must first address a common belief about the War of 1812 that is held by many people in our neighboring country of Canada, as well as by some people in Britain. According to some Canadians and Brits, the war was caused when the United States randomly invaded Canada, which was still under British rule at the time, and tried to conquer it by force. Canadian forces, it is said, simply repelled the invasion, drove the Americans back across the border into the United States, all the way to the U.S. capital of Washington, D.C., and burned the White House to the ground. After this, the war was over, with the Americans being the losers and the winners being either the Canadians, the British, or both, depending on who you ask. Having studied and read about the War of 1812 from a young age, I can tell you without a doubt this version of events is complete propaganda with a heavy anti-American bias and is not an accurate portrayal of what happened in the War of 1812. The truth about the War of 1812 is as follows. In the year 1812, the United States was very young, having gained independence from Great Britain only 36 years earlier. The country was not nearly as powerful then as it is now, and given its short existence on the world stage, it is possible that it was not respected by other countries that had been independent for much longer. Britain was one such country. Two things happened at once that resulted in the American people getting very angry at the British and wanting war. Firstly, Native Americans began attacking white American settlers on the western frontier, and it was believed that these Native Americans were being armed with British weaponry and encouraged by the British to attack American settlers. While some historians believe that the accusations Americans were making against the British were false, these accusations have technically never been proven false at all, so it is still highly possible that the British were in fact arming and instigating Native Americans against white Americans. Secondly, Britain's Royal Navy began to harass American sailors on the open seas. British vessels would frequently stop American vessels on the Atlantic Ocean and claim that some of the American sailors on board the U.S. ships were actually deserters from the Royal Navy. It was with this excuse that the British forcefully impressed multiple American sailors into service for the Royal Navy, thus violating America's naval sovereignty. These are the two initial causes that led to the War of 1812. There was, during the war, an attempt by the U.S. to invade and annex Canada, but it was only one-third of what the war was fought over. There is truth to the claims that the invasion of Canada was repelled and the White House burned, but it may have been British regulars that did those things and not Canadian forces. These are the results of the war. By 1814, both the British and the Americans had gotten tired of what seemed like pointless fighting and agreed to sign the Treaty of Ghent, which returned relations between the two countries to status quo ante bellum, which means the way things were before the war. The attempt to invade Canada had been a miserable failure for the United States. Britain had stopped forcing American sailors into the Royal Navy, and the Native Americans by now had largely been defeated. Peace had come, but news of the peace did not spread quickly enough, and the famous but inconsequential Battle of New Orleans was fought after the war was technically already over. That is the story of the War of 1812, a much more complex and interesting conflict than the oversimplified event that many make it out to be. My name is Wesley Cragen, and I am an American son of liberty.